Ladies and gents, welcome to TierZoo Reaction, and this is Earth's worst balanced patch by the channel TierZoo. Outside has seen a fair number of controversial updates over the history of the game, but none compared to the patch 1.2.1, aka the Great Dying. Here's how the meta shifted. Yeah, I guess there's some kind of extinction event he's gonna talk about here. Obviously, the Great Dying. So yeah, it's gonna be fun. I never thought I would react to any, animal related videos ever, but TierZoo is such a great channel. He explains things like it's a game or something, and it's always fun the way, he puts together the video, animates certain things. It's awesome. So yeah, I've reacted quite a few TierZoo videos already. If you haven't seen them, check out the classes, a playlist I've created for it, TierZoo Reaction or something like that. Check out the playlist too, like Old Sarcastic Production, Internet Historian, CGP Grey, Real Life Lore, Art, things like that. And yeah, let's watch this one. Oh, dinosaur.
We've covered a lot of topics on this channel, but pretty much all of it has been only related to the Anthropocene meta. So today I'm kicking off a new mini-series which seeks to give an overview of how the meta has evolved across all the previous expansions. Today's episode is about the Triassic period, an expansion sandwiched between two of the most controversial and meta-shifting balance patches the game has ever seen. Alright, so at the end of the Permian expansion...
Yeah, Cambrian, Ordovian... Devonian, Carboniferous, Permian. So that's end of Paleozoic period apparently, and then the Triassic came with Mesozoic period. I think that's the dinosaur time, right? Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous or something like that. I can't pronounce it. So yeah, and this is probably us. Yeah. So basically, it's talking about how the dinosaur came to be. Is that it? Damn, dinosaurs. I'm pretty sure those are the most powerful creature and most bigger and most strength-wise more dominating creature ever, right? It exploded around this time, or maybe I'm pretty sure it. I remember dinosaurs exploded in power and all the way intensity and size at the end of their time. So probably exploded around that time.
Came the balance patch 1.2.1, known better by its community-given name, the Great Dying. This update was heralded by one of the largest volcanic eruptions in the history of the game,
volcano, of course,
which led to a cascade of other world events that drastically increased the difficulty of the game on every single server. Spawn rates for plants, water, and even essentials like oxygen were at record lows, and as a result, around 90% of the player base quit. Just before the Great Dying, the all-powerful reptile faction had split into two separate groups, the Therapsids and the Archosaurs. Each of these guilds had started to innovate in their own unique ways in an attempt to claim the top spots in the meta. And so when the balance patch hit, the Triassic arms race began. So let's take a look at how the two warring factions innovated going into the Triassic. Therapsid players had already been experimenting with new builds before the Great Dying. They already had builds like the Dimetrodon and Gorgonopsid destroying the competition. Mobility-based builds were still in their infancy and weren't well optimized at all, but these two were the most mobile at the time. While this allowed them to body their competition at the time, it was the cooperative survivalist strategy of the Lystrosaurus build that carried the Therapsid faction through the balance patch. Lystrosaurus was able to deal with the extreme difficulty of the
Wait a minute, are Therapsids going to be the dinosaur? Since they are more dominant apparently.
Great Dying, because they could hide underground to avoid the atmospheric changes, and could use their tusks to access loot contained in the heavily armored plant roots. But aside from them, just about every other Therapsid build became obsolete during the Great Dying.
What?
After the difficulty was lowered again, the Therapsid faction put most of their evolution points into refining their most successful builds into the best versions they could be. They unlocked traits like fur, warm blood, milk, and whiskers during this time, laying the groundwork for some of the extremely important builds much later in the game's timeline. However, during the Triassic expansion itself, the Therapsid faction didn't really go for any of the riskier, more wild changes to their builds. Meanwhile, the Archosaurs chose a different route. At the start of the expansion, they were...
So basically, when the Great Patch was introduced, Therapsid's like, you know what, this is getting too serious. Let's put in points into more survival things, so we actually survives. And they just went, I guess, wimp and just put all their point into survival mode.
Were heavily unfavored in the Therapsid matchup. Their only option was to try some of the more drastic changes to their game plan in order to keep up with the competition. A group of them elected to compete directly with the Therapsids, and spec'd into similar land tank abilities. The only difference was, these players also put a few points into aquatic abilities, such as holding their breath and diving, which gave them a place to retreat if things got tough. While those players battled the Therapsids directly, Archosaurs set two more strategies in motion. The first strategy was to put hardly any points at all into HP, and instead invest heavily into upgrades related to skin aerodynamics, which allowed them to be the second faction in the history of the game to ever unlock flight. This worked because they didn't really need HP, seeing as the only other aerial builds were lower weight class insects like beetles and grasshoppers. Their massive mobility advantage was all they needed. Around the same time, another group of Archosaurs started to use an extremely off-meta technique that had never been done effectively. They switched from quadrupedalism to bipedalism. Obviously, this control scheme is more difficult to master, but it does allow for some very unique builds, and gives access to some extremely powerful advanced techniques. Freeing up your front limbs allows them to become more specialized for other uses. Digging, grabbing, tool use, the possibilities are endless. In addition, the height advantage is really useful for countering stealth, especially against builds that use tall grass, shrubs, or other foliage for cover or camouflage. This one change allowed the Archosaurs to gain a massive...
Yeah, that thing probably like, oh, I'm hiding, anti-clever, and that, long giraffe is like, dude, I can see you right there.
Advantage against the Therapsids. Although at this point, they collectively changed their gamer tags from Archosaurs to Dinosaurs. By the end of the Triassic expansion...
So Therapsids were basically the dominant one, and Archosaurus was getting their ass whipped. After this great patch, Archosaurus went, I guess, ballistic and started to, change drastically. And, became all this tanky, more DPS-based, more powerful build, and became Dinosaur. And Therapsids are like, you know what, let's put points into survival mode. Okay.
Dinosaurs, combined with pterosaurs and protocrocodilians, were absolutely dominating every server in the game. The first dinosaur builds to make waves in the meta were Herosaurus and Eoraptor. However, the real breakout came with the Coelophysis build. By trading a little of their power and HP, they gained traits that really put the nail in the coffin for the former champions of the Permian meta. Therapsids at this point had all but abandoned their former mains, such as the Placerius and Thranaxodon, and were now trying their best to just play small survivalist classes that could avoid the dinosaurs. However, this strategy did not save them from the new Coelophysis build. Their high mobility allowed them to keep up with these smaller builds, and their long necks and slender snouts allowed them to reach through barriers and into cover. At this point, the Therapsid guild had dissolved, having been completely eliminated from every niche they'd once held. A few loyalists remained though, hiding underground or in trees during the day, and only daring to venture out at night. They adopted a new guild name, Mammals. Dinosaurs were easily just as overpowered and abundant.
Oh, so Therapsids became mammals like us, so we are descendant of Therapsids. Yeah, that makes sense. When the dinosaurs roamed around, we were underground, so Therapsids basically. Yeah, alright, that makes sense. So basically the dominant species became more of a survival, weak species, and Archosaurus became dinosaurs, and basically we all know what happened next, right? So all the Jurassic Park movie where, these humans are basically running on trying to survive these dinosaurs, and then you see these giant dinosaurs breathing sounds and all these horrific scenes. Therapsids actually went through that part when they were hiding underground, and these dinosaurs basically, gigantic coming to kill them. They were hiding and surviving. God damn. So our ancestors basically did go through all that, Jurassic Park type of thing.
As the Therapsids which had come before them. So by now you're probably wondering, why didn't the devs nerf them in the same way that they did at the end of the previous expansion? And the answer is, they tried. At the end of the Triassic, another extinction patch was rolled out.
Eventually devs didn't just nerf them, kill them, so come on.
But I think the devs were afraid to use more of the harsh nerfing methods because of how drastically the player base had dropped after the Great Dying. And so instead of shaking things up in a way that would let off-meta builds steal niches away from the top tiers, what really ended up happening was that the dominance of the dinosaurs, pterosaurs, and crocodilians was only further cemented. So while the Permian extinction was controversial because of how badly it nerfed the top builds, the Triassic extinction was controversial because of how little it hurt the top builds. Starting here and lasting for the longest continuous time period.
So let me give this another extinction event basically made them even more dominant. God damn.
Dinosaurs would own every top tier niche in the game, branching out into pack hunters, solo tanks, team defense builds, and unstoppable DPS builds. We'll talk about those expansions as well as the ones that came before and after in other videos. But since we've just about covered everything about the progression of the Triassic metagame, that's gonna wrap up this video. Thanks for watching, and if you've got a time period, biome, or animal you'd like analyzed in a video, leave a suggestion in the comments of this.
Yeah. Basically, the dinosaurs were really OP, weren't they? I'm pretty sure the most powerful, most tankiest, and the biggest thing that ever existed was a dinosaur around the end of their time, basically. Dinosaur was just ridiculous. I saw the title suggested to me that should we bring back dinosaur from TierZoo? I haven't reacted to that. I'm probably gonna react that tomorrow or something. But that's just the answer is no. Hell no. Humans have nukes. That will never happen. Even if genetic engineering makes that happen, people will nuke them, I guess. Damn, that is. I mean, there are some, dinosaurs that were stories tall, like fucking giant buildings tall. That if they just walk around, they will look gigantic. That's so effed up. Yeah, that was our worst balance patch. Alright, people, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cast wall playlist. Check out the end cards, and I'll see you next time.